The Simone Feiler Podcast, giving authors a platform. Welcome to the podcast.
G'day there, Simone Feiler. Welcome to the Simone Feiler Podcast. We've just wrapped up 4 days, had a bit of a break in between, 3 big sessions a couple of weeks back and the last one today, but I think you've been practicing. Dr. Schneider did so well today. Presilience. You might be able to see the cover artwork here. How to navigate risk, embrace opportunity, and build resilience. Presilience, you know what resilience means, right? Presilience is something, well, I know all about now, but something you don't really think of. And welcome to the podcast, Dr. Gavriel Schneider, to tell us all about it.
Wonderful to be able to talk about a topic that obviously I'm passionate about.
Yeah, very. So, well, firstly, how did you find recording it as opposed to writing it?
Interesting. I think the right descriptor is humbling. You think you can read, and particularly when it's your own work, you think it will flow. But it was certainly more challenging than I thought, but equally rewarding.
Awesome.
Because I think there is that piece of you explaining your content and emphasizing the terms you want to emphasize.
Yeah.
That was quite rewarding.
That's fabulous to hear. So how did the concept of Presilience come to you at first?
It's probably a long-ish story,
Yeah.
But realistically, I landed up teaching a postgraduate program in the psychology of risk for almost a decade.
Right.
And I'd always ask the attendees of that program, most of whom were chief risk officers, CEOs, or senior executives, why are you coming to this program? Like, you've already got the job you want or the postgraduate level qualifications you want. And almost all of them came back with something along the lines of, you know, we're really good at implementing a process. We're really good at making sure we keep a regulator happy. Mm-hmm. We're not that good at getting high-performing teams and people who want to use risk as an enabler. In fact, many of them would share with me the idea that, you know, risk seemed to be a 4-letter word that people don't want to talk about and they don't want to think about. So originally we focused on the idea of risk intelligence, which you're now familiar with too.
Yes, I am.
As a skill set for how to make good decisions and be able to capitalize on the idea of risk. So, you know, it's great to understand risk management, but risk intelligence is the skill set that enables you to be good at risk management.
Yeah, that's right.
Originally, we thought it was just going to be an intersection of risk and resilience. So risk, it hasn't happened. Resilience is what we need when a risk does happen.
Yeah.
So part of the challenge with that was there's so many silos that have grown between these different functions. So if you look in corporates, for example, a risk team might sit there under, there's lots of places people put them, but maybe under the legal officer or the finance officer. Your resilience team might sit somewhere else if they exist at all. The cyber team might be sitting somewhere different. Safety would be sitting somewhere different. So that part actually started in about 2013 when we founded my business here, Risk to Solution, where we actually found that the way we were siloing risks created more vulnerabilities than solved.
Wow.
So when we started looking at the intersection of risk and resilience, then it became so clear that there's this big gap. And in the world of resilience, I landed up through COVID doing all these keynotes for the Global Business Continuity Institute and so many other associations. And everyone was very confused about resilience.
Right.
And I still think people are confused about it today.
Yeah.
And particularly, we'll explore that in a second.
Okay.
Because when you start looking at what does resilience mean to an individual versus a team versus an organization versus society.
That's what I found so interesting about the book.
That's where the differences come in, right? And when we talk about one specific type of resilience, so let's talk about, for example, health.
Yeah.
Like your ability to get sick and recover. You know, that part tends to be owned by the medical fraternity.
Yeah.
But you translate that into a corporate, and that part is owned by safety or HR. But in reality, it's me, the individual, that owns my
Well, that's
health.
what I was going to say to begin with. Like,
100%.
What about me?
So a corporate's job is actually how do they align with what's good for the individual, good for the team, and good for the organization, and possibly good for society if we're looking at a sustainable outcome.
Yeah.
And then the challenge we found where resilience was very well researched was in disaster recovery and response. And it was really interesting because there's a lot of work that's been done there on community resilience, you know, the ability to stop bushfires, floods, recover from them. But practically, we kept finding these challenges. The first one was some things, and this is definitely a life experience lesson for me, some things are so horrible, resilience is not the way you want to play them.
Right.
Because you will not bounce back from that thing. Or if you do, the consequence to bounce back is so significant that the disruption will probably break you.
Yeah.
So when those things are there, like that proactive prevention piece, it's almost missing in the resilience sphere.
Yeah.
So things like, not wanting to be in a robbery, not wanting to be in a terrorist incident, not wanting to get cancer, like the list of things from a personal level is pretty big.
Yeah.
But we very rarely actually think about them.
No, that's right.
And go, what are the steps I can do to limit or minimize the chance of that happening?
Yeah.
So that was actually the birth of
That's a
Presilience.
G idea, though,
It's interesting because, you have these ideas, and literally that one came to me out of frustration because we were running our consulting business. I was training all these experts, and I could not find the words, the language, and the models to explain to them what would work.
Right.
And eventually we found, okay, the risk intelligence thing is really useful, but if we roll out, and the original version, I'm going back now 2017, the original version of resilience was proactive. So Presilience was proactive resilience.
Okay.
As soon as we started rolling it out in our consulting business, we found it didn't work because the way people think, and this is where the neuroscience and sort of the psych comes in, resilience, respond, recover, react. So we're wired to do it after.
Yep.
So the actual mental shift of doing
Getting
it
your
first,
head around that.
it's really tough.
Yeah.
So we actually reached the conclusion of going phonetically, structurally, and even from an heuristic basis, those default decision-making processes, if we don't change it, it's not going to work. The next piece with that, so that was the proactive prevention piece,
Yeah.
is if you think about a disruption, anything negative that happens to you,
Yeah.
we've got really 2 or 3 choices. Like lots of people try to pretend they're not going through something,
Yeah.
which makes it much harder.
Yeah.
Some people have the mindset of stoicism. It doesn't matter what I go through, I can get through this.
it.
You got it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that as an approach.
Yeah.
It's just hard.
Yeah.
The challenge we kept finding in the literature, in the academic work, and particularly in the world of risk and resilience is every now and again you'd see mention of something like build back better.
Yeah.
But when you'd actually look for the practical case studies of where build back better happens, you're lost.
It doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, there was one of the academic papers I found which was literally called Lessons We Don't Learn.
Right.
And it unpacked all of these hundreds of lessons learned after disasters, catastrophes. And most of them were consistent, failure of communication, failure of planning, failure of preparation.
Yeah, that's right. Across all sorts of industry, I guess, and disasters globally.
You got it. So that was where the idea of opportunity centrism came into play. Yeah. To go, hold on, risk doesn't have to be a 4-letter word that we hate dealing with. In fact, you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
We need risk.
Yeah, exactly.
Without risk, you don't find a gap in the market, you don't run a good business.
That's right.
You don't find new ways of doing things.
Very true.
So for entrepreneurs, we tend to get it.
Yeah.
But then you start looking at the way risk is explained, shared, and taught everywhere else, and it's like something to be avoided, as opposed to something to be managed and understood.
That's right.
So that's where that sort of intersection really came into play. And then it probably took, honestly, maybe 6 or 7 large projects where we were using some of these tools, some of these models, including in my own business, to really refine what works and what doesn't, to the point that after about 6 years since the conception of the idea, I felt ready to be able to document what the solution process is.
Right.
Which, thank you for helping me get that into audiobook form.
My pleasure. And so how long were you writing as you went along, or obviously you were gathering sort of information about everything? So how did writing Presilience come about?
So as with most things in the modern world, not a linear, straight process. It started more
It'd be so easy if it was, though, right? But there'd be no risk in that, right?
and to your point, it is interesting. Like my second book, which was all around security and personal safety and situational awareness. We started training people in situational awareness as a corporate nearly 25 years ago.
Right.
And we've trained hundreds of thousands of people globally in situational awareness and how to stay safe and make good decisions.
Can I see your hands?
You got it. And we can circle back to that one also.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is it probably took me maybe 15 years of doing that, training hundreds and hundreds of people myself to actually go, I've understood it well enough to explain it.
Yeah, right.
So with the Presilience piece, honestly, I think we're at the very early stages of the idea, and my true hope is that we'll see lots of academic research and lots of people try different things with the idea.
Yeah.
But practically, it actually started first with a naming convention.
Okay.
All right, this is this thing.
Yeah.
Then we fought with definitions.
Right.
Which came back and forward for a long time, noting that this started in an academic program. So we had to introduce it at postgraduate university level, which comes with a whole bunch of more difficult ways of doing it.
Yeah.
We had to make sure the attributations were there. We had to make sure everyone else whose ideas we used to build the concept were named and acknowledged.
Right.
And as you can see in the book, that builds on so many other people's work from different sectors.
Yeah.
And I did feel that part was important because there's so much good stuff out there. The challenge is, the way I said, is synergy and being able to integrate and apply it.
Well, I found that, there's a lot of information in the beginning, but the way you tie it up, it was like the holistic approach with even that new age type of feel about it, about meditation and various aspects of that you really delivered well. So obviously that's, part of your passion as well, like having a clear mindset, thinking straight, being aware of the decisions that you're making and those sort of things.
Well, it's interesting, and we can segue into lots of different pieces, but for me, this is a lived experience.
Yeah.
Right? And if I look at the things that I've been through and that I've taught other people ideas or that they've shared with me, it's the combination of those variables. So having been involved in a fair amount of pretty dangerous and stressful things.
Definitely. Well, that's the nature of what you do.
It's how I
isn't
started.
It?
I mean, it's evolved now. I'm really a corporate CEO who spends most of my time on corporate matters now.
Yeah, definitely. But started out as a bodyguard.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that as well.
And that was back in South Africa and Africa, where the crime and violence rates are significantly different.
Yeah.
And probably one of the big turning points for me was my stepfather was killed in a carjacking in about 1998 or 99.
Wow.
At that point, I was already a professional bodyguard. I was a world full contact champion in the martial arts I was training.
Right.
And I still remember that incident as a turning point for me.
As it would be.
Well,
Devastating.
the fundamental lesson for me there was, it was incredibly humbling because at that point it was a Sunday night, the phone rang, grabbed my go bag. So for most Australians, that's not a known thing. But as a bodyguard, you keep a bag that's got first aid kit, spare magazines, torches, radios, etc. So you could just grab it and respond.
Right.
So I grabbed my go bag and I rushed to the scene. When I got there were two guys looting the car.
Wow.
Turned out they were two police officers who were still looting the car.
What?
I almost shot them both. Thank God, because my whole life would have been totally different had that happened.
Definitely.
But shortly thereafter, I realized there was nothing I could do at the scene, got to the site, also got to the hospital, and he had been shot right in the forehead.
Oh, that's
Took about 6 or 7 hours for him to pass away. But the scariest part for me, the shake-up there, was that I had all the knowledge, skills, and understanding, and I was even teaching it to others, but I never trained my own family. And it's fundamentally, I do business differently from that day.
Yeah.
And my approach is really, it does not matter how good the expert is, because the expert's probably not there when you need them.
Yeah.
How can we transfer the knowledge? So if you take that as an extreme version, I've just looked over all these years that people often approach me and they go, like, Gav, you've done so well, you've achieved all these different things. And I have been pretty good at being a high achiever in about 4 or 5 different areas.
Yeah.
What is interesting, though, is the biggest gift for me is the ability to distill knowledge and make it better for others.
Yeah.
So that's been the journey of Presilience. And I think it's really early now. This is probably the coming out party.
Beginning.
Exactly. with the books, while we've been training people. And
Look out, AI, you ain't got anything on Presilience.
but to your point, I see AI as a wonderful input.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
if we just think about it, the core concept for me with Presilience is we're looking at where the world is now and where we're going.
Yeah.
Resilience and compliance looks at where the world was and where we were.
Yeah.
So we're in this really weird evolutionary state where we actually need to do both. We need the compliance and resilience components, even though most of them are looking backwards or leaving your response to fate, which is often what we see with resilience.
Yeah.
If we can't change that thinking to be a little bit more balanced, then we're going to see consistent challenges moving forward. So if we look at the AI piece, I find it fascinating because realistically, one of the biggest challenges of the last era has been the focus on specialization.
Yeah.
Even if we can take any field, whether it's law, accounting.
That's right.
Even
medical.
Medical,
Yeah.
there are so many specialist subdivisions.
Yeah.
And we keep expanding the specialist subdivisions.
Yeah.
Those will change now with generative AI. The way we access knowledge, the way we understand knowledge, the way we get information
That's right.
is fundamentally never going to be the same.
Yeah.
So what are the unique things that are going to be differentiators moving forward? It's our ability to take that knowledge, understand the knowledge, and apply it for an outcome.
Yeah.
Those are human things,
Yeah.
right? So we need to be able to understand, get along, align, so that we can achieve. And the problem we've got is things change so quickly around us. What we thought we were aiming for now points somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that's really what we've
And really
built.
quickly, like that happens invariably more often than, back in the 80s, it didn't change like that.
You got it.
It was the onset of the internet. It was,
You got it.
Yeah.
So that's really this idea of VUCAD, volatile, uncertain,
I was going to
complex,
say that
and
because it
digital.
was VUCA first, but VUCAD you talk about in Presilience.
And it's that piece, like we want to give people tools. For me, it's simplistically two things. Can we give you the tools to enable you to maintain high performance during business as usual? Now, you talk to lots of executives and they go, why do we need that? We've got that. Then you look at the mental health statistics and people who are breaking and can't come to work. Okay, you look at the way people are motivated and the productivity pieces, and you go, we've actually got a massive problem. People don't know how to manage their mental health. They don't know how to manage their physical health.
Yeah.
That's not new.
Yeah.
But equally, they're not coping with the world we're in now. And we thought post-COVID, things would just instantly come back to normal.
Yeah,
We're still reeling from the social disruption that was.
definitely.
So part of the challenge now is the skill sets we need to thrive today, and I would say probably for the next 10 to 15 years. Further than that, who knows where technology is going to be sitting and what enablements will be there.
Yeah.
But at this stage, if we don't focus on some of those tools of Presilience, you're going to see more people break, more organizations perform poorly, and less alignment, less forward movement. So in a world, to your point, that is changing so quickly, we need a slightly different skill set. That's what the Presilience approach brings.
Well, initially when we first had a conversation about Presilience, I was, thinking this is incredible. Like, imagine being prepared for the resilience that you're going to need once this happens. Obviously, I've got a different outlook to the book now because I've heard the whole thing, but how do you think people can, band together? You do talk about them being more presilient, working in groups, but obviously imparting knowledge to other people. Like, for instance, you were talking about your dad and what happened to him and your family members about being prepared. I mean, the information in your book is self-explanatory for me, more towards the end of your book, but how can people get a grasp of what it actually means in a nutshell?
Awesome. So in a nutshell, we're looking at preventing the things that would absolutely derail you, and force multiplying the things that would help you, and equally being adaptive enough to make any outcome an opportunity, no matter how bad it is. So it's those two pieces are the underpinning skill sets. So those are actually more a mindset than a skill set. Right? I actually have to decide that's how I want to live. The problem then is how. Like, it's great to make a decision, but then how do you do it? What do you do? So that was why the toolbox piece became so important. Can we provide people with a suite of tools that enable them to do this for themselves? And I think this part is important. If you can't do it for you, what makes you think you're going to do it for your family or your workplace? It's not realistic. So the way I looked at it was this building blocks approach of self. Can I get decision-making, opportunity centers, and proactive prevention embedded as the way I think? Then can I pass that on to people I care about, at home, at work, or wherever else? And then can I relate that at an organizational level so we can achieve, a place where people are happy to work, where they believe in what they do, and it's fair and just, and we get good outcomes because of good decision making. And lastly is societal. Like, if we can get those first three right, we should start to make societies better. I'm not a bureaucrat who sets government policy, so I don't really have the luxury of going, this is what's happening for the whole of society. But even with that, I think fundamentally, and I'll give you an example of this now, these tools enable us to cope. So I didn't share this with you, but when I came in to record with you on the Monday, I'd walked into an incident, a domestic violence incident at a Woolworths grocery store.
Oh, dear.
Literally just before I came in, actually, on the Sunday night. And it's an interesting scenario because when I shared that with my head of training and consulting who works for me, he actually said, can we record that and share it?
Right.
Because what actually ended up happening was I used a whole suite of Presilience tools.
While you were there?
Without thinking.
Okay.
Because I've practiced this stuff so much. So the first part was sense making and meaning making based on what's going on. So it's a situational awareness piece. And it was scary to see how many people were standing around filming what was happening.
Wow.
And there was a young lady, she had a knife, she was threatening somebody. We had no more context than that.
Right.
That thing exploded to the point that eventually the police came, a bystander got stabbed trying to disarm her.
What the heck?
So that was first aid provision on my part.
Yeah.
Then this poor girl landed up, there's no doubt there was domestic violence or assault issue there because the man she was trying to keep away from her, actually after she was handcuffed from the police, came and struck her across the face really hard.
Oh, wow.
And then he was arrested. So if you look at this stuff like this, the world we live in is not clean and neat.
No.
People want to pretend it is, but that's just not how we thrive.
There's more and more stuff like that happening as well. You know, you see it in the news that there's stabbings and all sorts. So obviously we have to gear ourselves up to be more safe.
So that's the first part, right?
Yep.
Like the first part for me is if you don't understand how to be safe and achieve safety, how can you achieve high performance? So the safety component is an easy starting point. But if I look at a corporate example, I mean, my business 2.5-3 years ago when we came out of COVID, I had 30 people working for me and we got kicked around badly. Revenue dropped tremendously. Leading up to COVID, we were growing really well.
Yeah.
But it was the ultimate test case for Presilience because my view through that was this won't last. I need to keep my people safe and motivated.
Yeah.
And I need to be opportunity ready as we come out.
Yeah.
As we record this podcast, we're 320 people and we've 10 times revenue.
Wow.
The only thing I can say that we've done slightly differently is we've plugged everything with Presilience into the business.
Right.
So when we first took over the first large contract post-COVID, that was 120 people. And this was a pretty sick, poor performing contract. So these people felt uncared for, unloved. They didn't like what they do. They didn't like who they worked for.
Right.
And we kind of inherited that. So with my behavioral scientists, we plotted a plan. And normally a change plan in a corporate takes you 2 to 3 years to change behaviors, change structures. We got it right in 6 months.
Right.
And
That's smashed it.
That's it. And we kind of turned around and went, how? Like, how could we have reset this culture? How could we have got people aligned? How could we have got people thinking and feeling that we're there for them and with them as opposed to them only working for us? How could we have got the client to understand we are doing good things for them? And the outcome of this growth is exactly that. In fact, many of the clients that we have just given us more work because they've seen we're doing something different. And they're seeing that it's got the results they're looking for.
And the feedback from the staff, the actual people that are working there?
Wonderful. So what's fascinating about that is not everybody is ready for this stuff yet. And I think we've also got to accept some people are stuck in that mindset of compliance still. I'll only do what you want me to do.
Yeah.
Quite a few people, particularly confident people in their 20s and 30s, you know, there's that bulletproof mindset of, but what's interesting for me really is also that we've trained maybe several hundred risk and business leaders in the psychology of risk, which was the program that preceded the Presilience programs we run now. And the vast majority of them did incredibly well through COVID.
Okay.
They became the go-to people in their organizations. They became the people who solved problems. They became the ones that translated what was happening and enabled their organizations to get through it.
Yeah.
And more than that, some of them came out actually better than when they went in. And you know, we surveyed, so when we made the Australian Financial Review Most Innovative Companies, we surveyed a bunch of these people asking, you know, the stuff you were taught, did it help?
Yeah.
And the feedback was just humbling. And it was that kind of point that got me going, I got to keep working on this. We've got to share this.
Yeah.
There's something here that we're missing.
Well, your business, Risk to Solution, is incredibly successful, and it's won awards. You've won awards, and quite a few of them. So how did you get into Risk to Solution?
Interesting. So my first business started in South Africa in 2000, and it was a specialized security business that concentrated on training.
Yeah.
We then built an operations division which focused on bodyguards and security managers.
Yeah.
And everything that wasn't training or bodyguards and security managers, we put into this pile which we generally called risk management.
Okay.
Which was kind of all the other stuff we were getting asked for.
Yeah.
I got a scholarship to do my PhD here in Australia in 2008 and landed up spending really 1 month here studying or 1 month back in Africa or India or wherever else we needed to work.
Right.
And
you've seen the world. I was born in Africa too.
I know, I love that about you.
In Zambia. I wasn't a bodyguard.
Well, you're still alive and you're doing pretty well, so you must have kept yourself safe somehow.
That's right. That's right.
I love your sense. So what was wonderful about that period where I was studying for my PhD was I got to interview so many different stakeholders, from standards regulators to trainers to frontline people who were facing violence regularly. And that's where my fixation or focus on decision making really was embedded.
Right.
Because my PhD, I looked at high consequence decision making attached to use of force.
Right.
And the idea is, if I have to use force, either you're going to hurt me, but if I choose the wrong thing, I'm going to hurt you really badly, and people could die. And generally, we have a split second to make the right decision. So it's incredibly high consequence-based decision making with massive consequence.
That's right.
And as I researched it, I kept finding there are ways we can train people to more often than not make the right decision under pressure. We just don't do them. So when we landed up winning that psychology of risk contract with ACU, it was like a gift where we could explore this stuff further in a live feedback system.
Awesome.
But to your point, one of the things that I learned really early on, looking at the Australian market versus what we were doing internationally, especially back then, is that Australia, it's different. It's an island. It's far away from lots of other places. And pre the internet age,
and not as many people either.
Exactly, and a comparatively high standard of living. You know, we're a wealthy country, so the crime and violence of other places wasn't really manifesting here. Which is fascinating. Like, I love looking at what happens in different places. So what was evolving very quickly was workplace health and safety.
Right.
Because we didn't have the external crime and violence, we could look at accidents and we could focus on accidents.
Some would say it's too high. All the
Well, let's circle back to that.
The government papers and everything you have to sign. Bureaucracy.
But to your point, that's where that risk theatre thing comes in. Like, are we actually reducing risk, or are we just, pretending we are through all these compliance requirements? So that's where risk.
That's cool.
We'll have a chat about that shortly. But that's where we got into risk. Where we sort of went, hold on a second, most of what we sell overseas, we can't sell in Australia. So we bought a safety training business.
Right.
And the idea was then, no-brainer for me, because I like to think of it very simplistically. Like, if I'm a bodyguard and I'm protecting you, you're paying me to protect you from anything that will give you a bad time.
Yeah.
You're not going, hey, you're the security guy, so if someone wants to stab me, you're the guy. But if I have a heart attack, that's not your problem.
Right.
Or, if there's reputational risk, that's not your problem. Or if somebody, sends you hate mail online, it's also not your problem. Like, nobody would hire somebody that would only be so siloed in that specific area. But that's what we've done with a lot of our corporates. So it blew my mind back in 2012 or so. I could not sell safety and security as a package.
Wow.
And overseas, I was selling it no problem. Like, in fact, most of our overseas clients were focused on, we have a problem, just solve my problem. It wasn't, it's a safety problem, a security problem. The challenge we found here was the way organizations had siloed responsibilities. There were more gaps between the silos, or there was duplication. So that's where the idea of integrated risk management really started taking traction for us. I started writing articles on that in 2013 and 2014. About 6 years later, Gartner, who publishes a lot in that space, actually published an article saying something along the lines of, enterprise risk management is gone, it's time for integrated risk management.
Wicked.
So we were a bit ahead of where we had to be. I think there's space for all of that stuff. We then merged a medical and health business in, so we could do security, safety, medical and health.
Awesome.
And found slowly over time that realistically none of that stuff works well if you don't get the people stuff right.
Yeah.
So, as you heard in the book, it's really true for me. It was a layer of frustration where organizations, and this still happens, they'll pay us to do an emergency plan, develop a strategy for them, train their people, whatever it is. But if they have disengaged workers who hate what they do,
they're not going to listen.
Yeah, you said it. Like they're wasting their time.
Yeah.
They're wasting their money, and we're not moving the needle.
Yeah.
So, this idea of human centricity and how we capitalize on the human became one of our strong differentiators. And my persona actually, in terms of what I became known for, shifted from being a security expert to a human-centric risk expert.
Yeah.
I think I've kind of married them up a little now between security, safety, business, psych, and resilience, which I enjoy all of them equally.
Yeah.
But the interesting piece is, as to your earlier point, that's how it kind of evolved, where we started going, right, how do we do risk differently? And it's still changing continuously. I think we've got a lot of work to do, particularly in countries like Australia, where the mindset is primarily compliance driven.
Yeah.
And
so how do you think that how are you going to tackle that? Because there's a lot of people, I was impressed listening to your book, even just with the concept and idea, and you've clarified a lot for me on this chat, but how do we get people to really understand that, if we haven't got a system that's set up for it?
So it's a really interesting point. That's why we focused on self, others, and organization, and not try to let's change our regulatory frameworks.
Yeah.
Technology is going to disrupt a lot of this anyway. It's already happening.
Yeah.
Like if we look at most of our regulations, they're already out of date. They don't work because things have moved too quickly. But this is the legacy of the world that was, and we've changed too fast. So, you made the comment earlier about, you remember in the 80s, like things were slower.
Yeah.
Like we still had a pressure. We still had to do stuff. But,
Yeah.
If you left work, nobody was sending you 50 emails overnight.
No.
You didn't expect 15 calls on your mobile after hours.
That's right. You weren't, well, if you were a teenager, you weren't even allowed on the phone because it cost too much. You couldn't be on there for more than 5 minutes.
I remember that well, and now our age is showing too.
Traumatizing. And being in class where they said, you'll never have a calculator in your pocket.
Exactly right. So it's really interesting. So to directly answer your question, I think the way we'll do this is exactly how the innovation of the diffusion of innovation cycle works. So if you're not familiar with that, or your listeners aren't, that starts with innovators, then early adopters, then the early majority, then the late majority, then laggards.
Yeah.
I still feel we're at the innovator early adopter stage with this stuff.
Right.
And it's getting traction now. What worries me a little bit about the Australian market is I'm finding significantly more traction with this in overseas markets already.
Okay.
So that part does worry me a bit about Australia, that this was an Australian-born innovation,
and we're taking it up.
We're being very slow to move on it.
Yeah.
Whereas I've got organisations in the US and UK who I'm holding them back, not the other way.
Yeah, right.
So the good news is we're steadily training more Presilience practitioners.
Okay.
So we've got a graduate certificate, we've got a graduate diploma, and we've got a skills program, which kind of introduces you to the concept.
Yeah.
So my thought with this, and my true hope with this, is we can never do this on our own. Like, I can't do this on my own, even with the 300 odd people that work for me.
Yeah.
We need people to get behind this and gain the knowledge themselves. Now, this doesn't mean mastery or expert level, but I'll just give you a simple example. First few months into COVID, we were all shell-shocked, trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
Once we had settled into lockdowns, I started just running every day.
Yeah.
And eventually my back gave out, which was a long historical story, and it got to the point I couldn't pick the kids up, I couldn't sleep, etc. And I landed up having to go have a spinal fusion.
Right.
I took the concept of Presilience and I used that in what rehab physicians actually call prehab.
Right.
And I trained for my operation like I was training for a fight. And I went into that surgery almost in the best shape of my life.
Yeah.
Now, the conditioning hurt because my back wasn't strong.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Et but within a year, probably a year and a half, I was able to go and get graded to my 8th degree black belt and perform.
Fantastic.
Which I can really only put down to
the preparation
I put the work in up front. But then there were little things like, so that's the proactive side, right? As soon as I could, I pretty much had to teach myself to walk again. And it started with, they're pretty harsh with your recovery now in the hospitals. They get you up and moving.
Get out now.
But it took me about 3 weeks before I could actually walk out of the house.
Wow. I didn't realize it.
It was brutal. The first month, I couldn't walk more than 500 meters. But I just kept going and going and going. It took me an hour to walk a kilometer.
Wow.
The first time.
Massive.
And the steps were very small, but using the Presilience approach, my mindset was, how do I turn this into an opportunity? Right, so I got into a rhythm of going, every day I walk, every day I listen to either an audiobook or a podcast.
Yeah.
And I started looking at how I can plug that in. Quite quickly, we landed up expanding our cybersecurity practice. I landed up doing a graduate certificate in cybersecurity myself during that process because I had the opportunity, I had the time.
Yeah, you had the time there.
And I looked at what most others were doing, and they were just...
They were watching telly.
Exactly. Don't get me wrong, I watched a lot of telly too.
Yeah.
But there's that balancing piece. And the term we use is dynamic risk equilibrium.
Yeah.
How much risk do I want to take? How much risk do I want to avoid? And if I can get that balance right, you actually enjoy life and move forward.
That's very true.
You get the balance wrong, you're always in crisis.
That's right.
Or you're always picking up the pieces.
Yeah. Well, that's why Presilience is motivating for like your average person like yourself, myself on my own, because it's kind of inspiring for you to be motivated to avoid, not living your best life basically, or having a great outcome to whatever situation you're confronted with.
You've got it 100%, Simone. And the fact that even if you've just got that done, my work is done, I'm happy with you as an individual.
I got it.
But I'd like you to imagine something with me. All right, let's just think about this on a much larger scale.
Okay.
Look at the way most governments set policy. Okay, most of it is done in a 3 to 4 year election cycle.
I'm not a fan.
Well, it doesn't work well.
No.
So, this has got nothing to do with a political affiliation.
Yeah.
Like, democracy for most modern countries is the best we can do with right now.
Yeah.
But it's not a great system.
You're right. 3 to 4 years, and then they plan, and then it's over by the time they implement the plan.
Correct. Or they're driven by, the announceables or the media cycles or the perspective.
Yeah.
And I feel tremendously sorry for our leaders because part of the Presilience approach in a fast-paced world is you have to provide people with the opportunity to change perspective as more information comes out. Where we crucify our leaders when they say something and do something different. So we're not actually aligning these things. So it's not just our system, but just imagine this. Imagine our leaders applied not just a compliance and resilience approach, but actually thought about Presilience. Actually thought about what are the bad things we really don't want to happen? What are the good things we want to happen? Let's put our resources into stopping the really bad things and force multiplying the good things. Let's think about not just a short-term cycle. Let's think about what's good for the individual, the team, the organization, and society.
That would be amazing.
We'll get a better outcome.
Yeah.
Certainly better than what we're getting now.
Definitely.
So, I don't want to be arrogant enough to think I've got something that will make the world a much better place instantaneously, but I think we can start to turn the needle in a way that will get a better outcome. And where does it start? It starts with individuals.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, it starts with you being able to go, you know what? I'm actually going to get up and go for a walk. I know I don't feel like it, but hey, that'll help my health.
Yeah, that's
or
right.
Hold on a second. You're acting a certain way to me. Let me apply my emotional intelligence and understand why.
Yeah.
So that we can connect instead of conflict.
Butting heads, yeah.
So, and don't get me wrong, conflict can be positive, but we want mature, positive conflict where we move forward.
Yeah, where something good comes out of it, having it, even if the conflict's a conversation that you disagree on, but coming to a point where we can move forward with it.
So that part, I think, makes what we're talking about so important in the modern world now, because misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, we're bombarded with false narratives.
Everywhere.
100%.
Everywhere, yeah.
I feel so sorry for young people these days because how do they know what is real? It's so difficult.
Yeah.
So I think this is where the Presilience skill set, the risk intelligence pieces are going to be invaluable because we have to teach people to think, not just memorize checklists.
Yeah.
So compliance isn't enough anymore.
It's a hard thing to do, especially with social media and the kids just all scrolling on the phone to get them motivated to actually...
It gets
I've had
harder.
conversation, like I've said to my children, put your phone down and try and be find out what you like doing. rather than just being on the phone, you know. And they're like, well, I mean, my kids, they're not happy with me constantly talking about them. But I know it's not just my kids, it's all kids, you know. But there's a lot, obviously, that are learning work and whatever with doing that. But there's also a lot of people that are wasting their times and seeing stuff that they shouldn't be seeing at an early age and whatnot.
It's a minefield, right? And we haven't been trained for this. Like humans were not built for the way we live today.
Yeah.
This transition to a digital world has been so quick.
Yeah.
That most of the way humans function is not understood. So even looking, for example, I mean, you would have seen in the book I referenced Dr. Mary Aiken, who's considered one of the world's first cyber psychologists.
Yeah.
And if we start looking at how we're spending our time at work, online, at home, and then all the different pieces in between, we need to build the skills that enable high performance and safety across those domains. So part of the challenge is it's not good enough anymore to go, we will, provide the process, the system that is safe, because we failed.
Yeah.
Look at social media.
Yeah.
We failed.
Yeah, we did.
We have to accept that. It's not.
We helped with the failure.
Well, there's no blame there.
It
just
was all
moved too quick.
Collectively failure.
But it just moved too quick, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got these competing challenges of free market economies, sharing of information, with personal privacy, with safety, and most of these things are not aligned in a cohesive way. They compete. So part of the challenge at the moment is, I would say the starting point is if the individual can determine what's real and what's not, and not buy into emotional narrative as easily.
Yeah.
And then the emotional content is really useful. It's important, but that shouldn't trump the logic. So part of the challenge we've got at the moment is that, as soon as we started using terms like my truth, there is only one objective truth.
Yeah.
It's my perception of the truth that changes.
Yeah.
So we have to learn to manage perception, which is why the psych piece is so important for this. Because if we don't get the psych stuff right, you don't understand yourself or others.
Yeah.
We can't get high-performing teams. We can't get organizational high performance.
Yeah.
So we land up falling back on the thing that's comfortable, which is compliance.
Yeah.
And we know for a fact that the more we tell humans you have to, the less it motivates them.
Yeah.
So we have to then have negative consequences for when they don't perform,
that's
which
right.
creates a spiral of negativity.
Yeah.
Not saying we don't need that for certain things.
Yeah.
And equally, I think we've got to be mature about the world we're in. I mean, you and I think, would align on, imagine for a second we spend no money on defense. All the money that was being spent on bombs, armies, etc., was put into solving the problems we have now and making sure humans were okay.
Yeah.
You and me both know the first country that says they're going to do that will be the country that gets attacked and invaded. We are not there yet.
Yeah.
I truly wish with all my heart we were.
Well, there's a couple of neutral countries that haven't been, but you don't know where it's going to go with what's coming.
But even that, think about the history of that. So let's take Switzerland as an example.
Yeah, Switzerland.
Switzerland became
New
neutral because
Zealand,
they were
neutral?
Depends which.
Yeah.
But they're part of our Five Eyes intelligence sharing networks, etc. Yeah. But Switzerland was so good at winning wars that they became neutral because they were too good at it.
Right.
So a lot of times, like we get periods of peace out of disruption.
Yeah.
And we're in an incredibly disruptive period now.
We really
are.
There's
disruption after disruption,
especially
change after
with the news just of late with all this stuff going on.
So, part of the challenge I think we've got is it's a little bit less about judgment.
Yeah.
Because it's really easy to be judgy. Like, it's really easy to go, your view is not my view, therefore, you're wrong and I'm right.
Yeah.
That doesn't move us forward at all. In fact, all it does is pull us apart. And it was fascinating. I did a trip through the US last year. I did a few. And I'd meet with some of the smartest people. And what was amazing to me is the mental separation between their politics.
Yeah, it's
and
very
the passion
divided.
behind it. And for me, as an outsider, I'm sort of sitting there going, you all believe in the rule of law. You all believe in democracy.
Yeah.
You all believe that we should have the freedom to choose.
Yeah.
You all believe in whatever this America idea was. So you actually have more in common than you don't. But there's been such a push on driving divisiveness that the people have forgotten how to actually have a conversation, disagree, and go, that's fine.
Yeah.
We can disagree on X and still like each
yeah,
other.
you hit the nail on the head. That's the problem. There's so much divisiveness in the situation that has been built up today is that nobody can see past that. They can't actually be caring and considerate enough to actually think, it's all right what you think or what you believe, but we can still be human beings. And
well, this is the interesting piece. So you'll see, as you have seen in the book, that's why we've had to include things like cognitive bias management or how your reticular activating system works or how to overcome cognitive dissonance. Because if I can't manage those things, I can't even build rapport with one other human.
That's right.
Never mind us get high-performing organizations.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting in a world now where we seem to just be getting pushed and pulled from one extreme to the other. Yeah, realistically, in times of flux like this, we need more stability. Stability comes from rational thinking with the ability to rationally align.
Yeah.
Incredibly hard when people feel that what they want is not what's happening.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, if we look at this from a big picture perspective, unfortunately, democracy is a flawed system. It's the best one we got at the moment.
Yeah.
But
it needs Presilience, a bit of work, right?
Well, and this is the interesting piece. I'm truly hoping others will take this work forward as well. Because if we start looking, for example, at Presilience plugged into policy setting in government structures, instead of just guessing, or instead of just going, hey, let's set a law that says X. And you can see there's organizations and government departments that are trying to do this.
Yeah.
For example, this is Australian-centric, but about 2.5 years ago, we started regulating the security of our critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of the way that legislation rolled out. I'm not a massive fan of compliance, back to your point, because if it's compliance for a purpose,
you need a permit for everything.
Exactly right. But if you have to spend so much money just to be able to play the game, you make it too hard and people can't play anyway.
Yeah.
And to your point, I think we've passed that line. So there is a line where compliance is useful, but there's also a line where it becomes a disenabler and stops innovation, stops motivating people, etc. And I think particularly in Australia, we've had a hard time with that. But this regulation around securing critical infrastructure, why I like it so much is it's risk-based. And you've gotten to know me a little bit. I love anything to do with risk. The challenge with that is it requires organizations to actually be very good at risk. So the regulator is not saying to them, here is the 15-point checklist, tick all these things. They're saying you need to understand your business and you need to manage your risk, and then you need to prove to us you do it in a sufficiently robust manner. And most of the pushback has been, just give us the checklist. This is too confusing. We're not sure what to do.
Yeah, because we're not used to it.
Or we'll just tick what we think will get us out of trouble.
Right.
Which is such a failure of understanding.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the way what we're talking about plugs in, it's designed to create high performance. The outcome should be a better business. The outcome should be a place where people are happier and healthier.
That's right.
So if you do this stuff right, it is an enabler.
Yeah.
The challenge we've got is we've dealt with realistically around 100 years of reinforcement that when there's a problem, you create a rule and you enforce the rule.
Yeah.
We've now gotten to the point that there's too many rules to enforce. The rules are so complicated. We need so many experts. We have to get into a more
and everyone's
agile
compliant
state.
with all those rules, generally speaking, here in Australia, that they're a bit probably not game to take the risk to break out of those moles,
Well, here's the interesting piece. So compliance on its own, there's nothing wrong with it, right? If we can't, just think back to some of the most basic compliance requirements that were put there. Don't murder another human.
Yep. That's fair.
Don't steal someone else's stuff.
Yeah.
We need rules. Otherwise, humans act very badly.
Yeah.
The problem is when those rules become so complex and so convoluted, and we are now in what's referred to as a networked environment. So there is quite a bit of that in the book, because if you don't understand different systems, it's really hard to understand what style of risk management works.
Yeah.
So for compliance, we need lots of control and lots of certainty. Okay, and I'll pause there for a second because I'd ask your listeners to think about their world now, their daily world. How much control and how much certainty do they have? Do their employers have? Do their governments have? It's not what we wish it was.
No.
So the challenge now is we're using the wrong tools. So when we have certainty and control, compliance works well, works really well. But we keep pretending we do, and we keep trying to use the same tools. So we have to change.
Yeah.
It's really hard also because fundamentally most of the corporate, organizational and government structuring we use today came out of the first industrial revolution.
Yeah, it's outdated. So if you had the opportunity, who would you and you could speak to someone in government here in Australia, like, have you got someone in mind that you could approach, that you could say, hey, you're thinking of,
Well, we've shared these ideas with quite a few people in government already.
Yeah.
I think for me, like, we have discussions going on with a few government departments. I've kind of shifted a little bit, and I'm thinking I want the individuals to grab this stuff.
Yeah, right.
That's the book. That's the audio book.
Yeah.
I want people to take this, make it theirs,
Yeah.
so that they can be Presilient in their own lives, their own careers, their own teams.
Yeah.
When that's starting to get critical mass, it'll happen
It'll be
on its
easier.
own.
It'll roll. Yeah.
So I am hoping that we'll get a few early adopters
Yeah.
and maybe one or two innovators. That tends to not come from government usually.
No.
That tends to come from the private
Yeah.
sector. And we've had a few of those already in the private sector.
Right.
You know, we've had rail companies, health funds.
Oh, that's a good thing.
We've had a few stakeholders get involved and run these things. But a lot of them were done more because there was a compliance requirement. They had to solve X, and they realized that if there's a human factors or human-centric piece, it'll make that better.
Yeah.
As opposed to going, hey, let's build this high-performing, sustainable culture. And let's make Presilience the backbone of the way we make decisions. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like, Presilience on its own without compliance and resilience is dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, if you're always looking for opportunity centrism and proactive prevention, you're probably going to get stuck.
Yeah.
And I've had some of my clients who really fell into this, and they went, we love this.
Yeah.
We want contingency plans for everything. Yes. I'm like,
No, that's not what we're doing here.
you've got it. And my response to them was, firstly, it's going to cost you a ton of money.
Yeah.
Secondly, the second you stop penning, those plans are out of date.
Yeah.
So the maintenance is the problem.
That's right.
Thirdly, who's going to apply your plans? So that's where the critical risk management thing comes in. If we can focus on the critical things, have plans for those, look at the integrated risk methodology of going, if I've built the skill set for this, and this happens and it's very similar, surely my system should be able to expand to deal with something similar. So it's about exactly what we spoke about in the books, this ambidextrous capability.
Yeah.
You know, you want to play by the rules, you want to have everything in place for scale and consistency, but we need to be highly adaptive at the same time.
Yeah, that's right.
That's hard.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting out of this discussion is you're seeing how all these pieces intersect.
Yeah.
And I think that part is really important. If you try and take even what we're talking about now and put it into just a little box and go, this only works for cybersecurity, or it only works for personal safety, or it only works, you know, for tax savings, or a specific area, we miss the point. And the point is that if we can get a slightly different way of thinking and allocating our resources, we can get a better outcome.
And everybody wants that. And I think it's timely because the whole planet's in disarray at the minute, isn't it, really? Everything's gone so fast, and then the situation with, you know, the disruption around the planet. But Presilience, your printed book, it's out there.
1st of April is the release of the printed book.
Exciting.
You can order pre-copies off the publisher's website now.
Okay, excellent. And where can you get that? Do you want to tell everybody?
That's just Amplify Publishing.
Yep.
If you just search for Amplify and Presilience, I'll pop up, and you can pre-order the book.
And then the audiobook?
Well, the audiobook should be released on the 1st of April,
It
hopefully
should
with
be.
all of that at the same time, subject to you working your magic.
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks.
So it'll be on Audible and 50 plus online global retailers, as well as Gav's website.
Awesome.
What's your website?
drgavschneider.com.
Awesome.
You can also check out presilience.edu.au. You don't necessarily have to wait for the book to come out. If you want the knowledge now, we run regular training programs, and those kind of run on 3 levels. There's the introductory level, which I consider like a tour, which you've done a bit more than that. We call that the Stactical Skills Program, because that's just 2-layered thinking. How do we get there? Then we've got our graduate certificate, which for me teaches people how to read the map themselves and navigate their way around.
Right.
And then the graduate certificate, which is, for me, the ability to build your own map and plot your own course.
Yeah, right.
So the graduate diploma.
And what about working with you one-on-one? Can people do that?
Absolutely. So I have a pretty robust speaking career, and I do one-on-one coaching and mentoring. I'm not a massive fan of the one-on-one stuff, but when there are motivated individuals who want to improve their performance or just want to bounce ideas off, I've always got people reaching out. I love it. If I can help, I think that is my job, like literally my actual job on the planet. But there's obviously time limitations and resource limitations with that.
Yeah.
We do also have an online training academy that's got a bunch of the stuff on it, and it's really cheap to do a lot of those courses. That's r2s.academy.
Yeah.
There's a ton of free stuff out there on Presilience also. Like
Yeah.
I've been publishing articles, we've been writing about it, talking about it for nearly 5 years.
You just have to look up Dr. Gavriel Schneider and you'll find a whole bunch of information. We didn't even get a chance to talk about you. We did mention that you were born in South Africa. Obviously, you were bodyguard for many years, but obviously now you're doing such good work for everybody to try and make the place a better place, you know.
Well, thanks. And I think for us, you know, we have this saying in my business, make a dollar, make a difference.
Yeah.
Like we are a for-profit business, and I don't apologize for that, because if we're not making a profit, how do I support my people?
That's right, exactly.
But there's got to be that ethical underpinning there.
Yeah.
And I think, thank goodness, you know, we've been in business, our Australian business started in 2008. We've been in business long enough now where generally we can actually choose who we work with.
Yeah.
And more now, we're trying to focus a little bit more on the clientele that are aspiring for a Presilience outcome. Yeah. It doesn't matter where they are when they start. In fact, most of the time, the best clients for us are the ones who go, we think we're pretty good, but we could be better. The ones we find are the worst, who generally will say no to and walk away from, are the ones who go, we've got it all sorted, we just need someone to tick and flick and approve or give us external validation about what we've done.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. That's good.
It's those you're not moving the needle at all.
No. What about business owners that think that they're ready to find out more?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do quite a lot of work in the small and medium emerging market space as well.
Yeah.
I love working with entrepreneurs and small businesses because
Yeah.
we get it.
Yeah.
And honestly, nobody gets the pain
Yeah.
of trying to make something work like an entrepreneur.
You got to work hard. It's a hard slog, you know. But I think the key to being an entrepreneur, and you can see it clearly in yourself, is that you've got to be passionate and love what you do.
It certainly
You know
helps.
what I mean? It really does.
And, you know,
because I couldn't imagine doing something that as full-time as what I do, being an entrepreneur and, you know, having my own business, that I didn't like doing as much as what I do this, you know what I mean?
Well, it's quite interesting. A few years ago, one of my psychology of risk grads actually shared with me that they view themselves as an intrapreneur.
Right.
And I'm like, explain that to me. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
I got excited. And they went, I'm the person who improves how we do stuff in my business. And they were using the words they worked for a government department.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, how good is that? You've got somebody who believes so much in what that department does that their goal, personally, is to make it better.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And for me, I'm kind of going, well, you are the perfect Presilience
that's good.
practitioner.
Yeah.
The hard part with a lot of those people is that, unfortunately, everything new, and this is new, it's a different way of thinking, is often met with resistance.
Yeah.
So I had a lot
To begin with.
And I think
We've all got phones and we're all on the internet.
you got it. And we're all starting to use AI.
That's right.
So
ChatGTP, my best friend.
and why wouldn't it be? It speeds it up, makes it better.
Yeah.
You just have to manage the risk.
Yeah.
So part of, I think, what we need to be trying to do is just understand that just because somebody wants to tackle something in a slightly different way, it doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's necessarily going to disrupt everything that you've tried to achieve. And part of the challenge, I feel the most sorry for organizations that are 30 years or older, because they were built into existence pre the internet age.
Yeah.
So all their infrastructure was built on a different operating system, different operating paradigm, which means their people were programmed differently. Their policies were programmed differently. And if you look at any organization or society, to be honest, culture evolves from learning from mistakes.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to learn from them. If we're not learning from them and we keep repeating them, we're not moving forward.
Yeah.
So I do worry a little bit, particularly from an Australian perspective, that we're not being competitive enough. If I look globally, you know, people are hungry, they're learning, they're educating themselves, they're moving quickly, they're making mistakes and
We're
failing.
still saying she'll be right, mate.
Well, either she'll be right or hold on a second, I don't think we should do that until we've done a full risk assessment, which might take 3 years. So that's also why we wanted to introduce and really focus on this idea of intuitive and quick decision making.
Yeah.
Because not every problem can have the luxury of deep thought
Yeah.
or deep research.
Yeah.
And part of the challenge with that also is things are moving so quickly
Yeah.
that by the time you finish researching, that problem's already changed.
I can definitely see the merit there because, with the onslaught of the internet and now AI, that you will have to make decisions quickly. And if listening or reading Presilience is the way to get an idea of how you can do that, then I highly recommend it, having just spent the time with Dr. Schneider going through the whole book and narrated superbly by himself, I might add.
Thanks, Simone, and thank you to you for the process. If any of you are considering writing a book and turning it into an audiobook, get help when you do the audiobook component. If you can learn a lesson from me, I'm so grateful that I actually landed up using help for the audiobook. There was a lot of guidance out there about doing it on your own, and it is achievable to do it on your own. I just don't think you'll get the same output. So thank you for all of your work on that.
Oh, my pleasure. I enjoyed working with you. I'm very lucky that I get to hear and work with people like yourself who are, very passionate about what they do, and here you'll be the first to hear your audiobook, basically. I get the authors reading their books to me. How lucky am I, literally, and then get to chat with you on the podcast after.
That's awesome.
To ask these questions. But yeah, maybe down the track we'll have another chat and see how things are going.
Would love to. Maybe Presilience 2.0.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Simone.
Thank you. Thanks for joining the Simone Feiler Podcast.
What's your story?
Contact Simone for a chat at brisbaneaudiobookproduction.com.